What's up, summoners? King Blair here. Today, we're going to be talking about the current knight meta or tank meta that is occurring in Epic 7. Who are the key actors in it? And why is it so freaking strong? And why it's so dangerous for the game? And what can we do about it? Or what can Smilegate do in the future? Now, this is more of a serious topic because there's a lot of top level players and content creators that are not happy with the current state of the game because they feel like it's just very slow matches, very repetitive, and just tanks is the only way to go. That's the only real viable strategy in RTA. So people are not happy with it. So even if it does not affect you, it's affecting a large point of the player base that also supports the game financially, and it's something that you should be concerned about and also worry about yourself. But if you do like the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and join the Discord server. Now, the way that this video will be broken down is first we're going to be talking about what the knights are. What are they supposed to be, and why they weren't a problem before? Right, they were pretty manageable. They had pretty clear and defined weaknesses. Then we're gonna be moving on to who the key actors are that kind of started breaking down those traditional knight roles, and then ultimately also the artifacts that are honestly so powerful and just add on to the fire that is the knight meta. And lastly, what can we do to try to fix it? Right. So first, let's describe the knights. What are they supposed to be, and what were they in the past before Emerald Crow, right? And he's a big reason why the current meta is the way that it is. So knights in the past are often units that can provide a lot of support for the team while also interrupting the opponent and providing support for you. The biggest thing is like when we think Fallen Cecilia, she's kind of like the baseline of a really good knight, right? She does her job very well at protecting the team, as well as being an annoying unit that can provoke and do a lot. And she's been around for a very long time and has been very powerful. But in the recent times, with all the different things that are added in all the different units, Fallen Cecilia has become started a problem. And we'll talk about that later down the line. So tanks are supposed to be very defensive and are supposed to stop you from getting cleaved. But their weakness is supposed to be that they don't do damage or they're kind of slow, right? So typically they can get controlled, they can get lapped, they won't be killing your team. So picking a full tank team is often punished by picking more aggressive options or control, right? But there's some units that, as we'll see later on, do not affect this. So also kind of seeing some of the statistics, if we see some of the most used units in RTA are tank or tanky units. So Fallen Cecilia, Last Rider Craw, Rella Light, and Tempest Surin, who just fits really well. Rowana, Ambitious Tywin, and then your couple of damage dealers. But for the most part, pretty tanky. And we'll look at the key players in a second as well to see how they're being so oppressive in RTA, because that's just regular arena, right? And it's early week where people don't have the most defensive options. But knights typically are balanced or normally have been balanced, but now they have lost their biggest weakness that has been the fact that they don't do damage. So let's go over to the key actors that are affecting the game. So as far as the key actors who are affecting this game, there are three units that, as they were introduced and as they were buffed, started pushing the meta to go this way. Now there's a lot of different units you can talk about, and there's a lot of finger pointing we can do, but the three knights that are taking over right now in RTA, in regular arena, are going to be these three. Now I am on my brother's account and I am a Tywin abuser, but these three units have completely force the meta to shift towards a tank meta. The biggest one being Last Rider Crow. So first, let's look at each of them. Why are they so oppressive, and why have they created this tank meta? Fallen Cecilia, while she may not do a lot at face value, and she's just mostly a defensive unit, people do build her with very high crit damage, where she can do considerable damage to squishies on the enemy team if there's no damage mitigation on their side. The other thing is that she provides a massive barrier that a lot of units can abuse, most notably Rylet, Arbiter Vildred, and T-Surin. T-Surin with the barrier is essentially unkillable. The Arbiter Vildred, because he has so many lives, it is harder to apply extinction if they are hidden behind a Fallen Cecilia barrier, as well as potentially some Night artifacts, so you can't land the extinction at the time you wanted. And also just and Rylet, because now every time you miss on a Rylet, he gets another barrier. So every turn you're not able to kill him, it's another turn that he'll get a Fallen Cecilia barrier and be able to set up. So she's a very strong defensive unit. And normally this would not be a problem. In the past, while she has been a really strong arena defense unit and has been very oppressive, this has been added to the fact with other units coming into the meta, particularly in RTA, because Fallen Cecilia, not that much damage. But now we introduce buff a Tywin, who also counters what knights are supposed to lose to. A Tywin has insane ratios in his skill 3. This skill does a not okay amount of damage. This paired up with the Soulburn, allowing it to reset its cooldown, essentially making it once every 2 turns. You get a massive AoE that stuns, applies decreased speed, and does considerable damage to a team that's typically more squishy. That's not going to be good. Right, so one of the biggest players is going to be a Tywin. His ability to control and his ability to do damage are so much. The other thing is that he allows for these tank teams to be able to have access to cleansing debuffs from the opponent. So as we mentioned, debuffs are pretty important to dealing with tank teams, right? Broman, Basar, they're all very good units at dealing with tank teams. But now because of the existence of a Tywin, you now have a way to instantly remove debuffs and make it harder to land your debuffs on a tank team. And then the most noticeable of all, ML Crawl or Last Rider Crawl. He is the last one to cause this tank meta to be as oppressive as it is. A Tywin, Fallen Cecilia, they were strong, but it was manageable. With the introduction of Last Rider Crawl, that balance, or that semblance of balance, was completely shattered. The buildup of Fallen Cecilia, a Tywin, came crashing down when ML Crawl was introduced. Why? At face value, it doesn't seem like a lot. He's just a knight that does damage. And that's already too much. With the existence of Portrait of the Saviors, he's able to do 7,000 damage as an opening S3 to the opponent and set up immunity. This ability also lets him counter C-Side, his S2 lets him counter C-Side Bellona and other AoE damage dealers that normally are really good counters towards knight teams, and he comes back, tanks all that damage, and comes back and destroys you with more S3s. So the immunity stops control teams from reliably landing their debuffs unless they put 2 very big strippers, while also doing insane amount of damage. This will almost kill a Spectre Tenebria, a Rylet, and all these different units and set them up for death. Rylet, while really well with tanks, in RTA, if you don't have that perfect tank team built around him, Amokra will just eat through him. And we have seen the oppressiveness of these units. If we look at Shogun's previous tournament, there were 69 matches in Shogun's tournament, and Emil Kral was there for 61 of them. Whether he was banned or pre-banned, he had insane amount of representation, and the win rate is insane. These are top level players with top level units that should be able to handle this unit. An almost 80% win rate is astronomically good. That is so hard to argue that Emil Kral is not a problem. The representation and the win rate show that he is an oppressive unit. When we compare to all these other units, the win rate doesn't even come close. And then when we look at units like Ambitious Tywin, while he didn't have as much representation, the win rate was still, again, astronomically high in a tournament that's supposed to be top level players that are supposed to be able to deal with this. You would expect units like this to be closer to 60%, even 70%, but almost 80%? There's almost no RNG in aspect to this. It's just pick tank and you're going to win. It is the dominant strategy now. Now there are other players such as Emil Hayes who fit into tank teams extremely well because again they do damage mitigation and do damage. So these three knights are the cornerstones right now that are creating this knight meta. And there are other units like Lilius, there are other units like Royal Light, there are other units like Diani that I did not even mention, but these three are going to be the bread and butter of the problem. Now, it is not only these units, right? Because as we mentioned, knights still are performing their current role. So let's see the artifacts that cause it that are also part of this problem. Now, the units and the knights are not the only thing that is causing this tank meta to occur. One of the biggest factors that is aiding these knights is the fact that they can do their damage but still provide insane amount of support. Why? Because of the power of the knight artifacts. And there are two very powerful knight artifacts that are out there right now. One of them being Aureus and the other being Adamant Shield. Now, if you've never read Aureus, this increases the defense of all allies by 10%, which is a lot. 10% increased defense is nothing to laugh at, especially when it's put across the whole team. But on top of already providing a very powerful passive skill to your team, they're also providing insane damage mitigation to the rest of your team by taking 20% of the damage you would have received and giving it to your very beefy knight. Right? So insane amount of damage mitigation. This effect does not stack with other distribution effect, but it does stack with other damage reduction effects. This means that something like Adamant Shield can also add on to the problem. With Adamant Shield, you're able to decrease critical hit damage received by 16%. That is a very big layer of crit damage that you're cutting off. That's a lot of damage. And again, when one or more similar effects is granted, you can stack. This means that on top of this, you can add on an Emil Haste passive that reduces damage by 10%. Now you start to see why damage mitigation is so powerful. But instead of me just telling you it's powerful, why don't I show you it? Why don't I show you how strong it really is, right? So here we have a Bloodblade Karen, right? With 4,500 attack and 350 crit hit damage. Y'all can agree with me, that's a really good Bloodblade Karen, right? It's not something that most people are going to be able to do. And let's give her Portrait of the Saviors on top of all of that as well, right? So let's give her Portrait of the Savior as well. She's going to be doing, with Portrait of the Savior, this 45,000 and 350 crit damage. She will be doing 21,000 AoE to every unit. This will kill every single squishy in the game, whether it's Rylet, whether it's Seaside Bellona, whether it's Arby, any squishy, Spectre Tenebria, they will die, right? And even some tanks like Roll will die, right? If you look at things like, oh, this is 1100 defense. When you go on something like Roll Light, you start getting to the 1800, right? So it still may not kill Roll Light, but would be very close to killing, right? But now let's go back to our squishy example, right? With Rylet, right? So let's assume you actually are managed to hit Rylet. Let's put in the passive of Aureus. Aureus gives a 10% increase to defense. That 2100 went all the way down to 20,000. Right? So almost over a 1,000 damage decrease. And we just have input the increased defense effect. On top of that, let's put the 20% damage transfer from Aureus. Your 2,100 damage has now become 15,000. Now, we haven't even gotten to the damage reduction because now we have to look at Adamant Shield that is decreasing by another 16%. That 2,100 damage that you initially did with your BBK is now only 13,000. That is almost 50% damage reduction. That's insane. If y'all can't see why that's crazy, it shows you how powerful this damage mitigation is. And you can even go further. Let's say you have a Seaside Bellona, that damage transfer becomes 30%. And that's why Seaside Bellona used to be such a powerful unit, because look how much damage is being reduced. So just with Adamant Shield, just with Aureus, just those two artifacts combined, your Rylet, that your BBK, your godlike BBK, if she manages to hit the Rylet, she's doing 1,300. Rylets are typically around 10,000 HP. Now add on a 5,000 barrier from a Fallen Cecilia. A godlike BBK with insane setup with the increased attack, with almost unachievable attack and crit damage stats, add a FCC barrier, and you're probably not killing this unit. And you've invested so much, and this is just by the numbers. We're not even looking at if you do a full tank team with an ML Craw. Now, your damage is 10k. That doesn't even do half. That's not even going to do half of their health, right? So there's a lot of damage mitigation that comes from these two artifacts. So this allows knights to do damage because they have the artifacts to do the hell for them. So again, very, very powerful, and knight artifacts are just absolutely insane, and why Aureus and Adamant Shield are just so, so powerful. But now let's see what we can do. So now we've talked about what knights are supposed to be, who the key actors are, and why the artifacts are so powerful. So what can we do? So as far as nerfing the heroes, Smilegate has already said that nerfing heroes is not in their journal, right? They are not trying to nerf heroes. They said so Fallen Cecilia, Ambitious Tywin, Last Rider Crawl are most likely going to be here to stay, which again, while I may not agree with it in the case of Last Rider Craw and potentially even a Tywin, they are not going to be getting nerfed, right? Because there's precedent. They don't want to give the 5-star ticket to selector. They don't want to have to deal with all these different things that come with nerfing a unit. So what can be done? Well, there is nothing that says we can't nerf the knight artifacts. So as you mentioned, that damage mitigation, it's what's allowing knights to be built with damage while also protecting units like Tesurans and other units like that. There's also a lot of knight artifacts that are getting underused that are also very, very cool and interesting, but people just opt to take Adamant Shield and Aureus versus like Bastion, Rise of Monarch, even in cases Elra's Sword and Holy Sacrifice and Crown of Glory, which are all really cool artifacts. So nerfing these artifacts would be a start. This is not going to fix the meta, but it would help other units be able to attack. Now the counter argument is we have to guard against cleave, right? But with the existence of Fallen Cecilia, and we're not saying remove these artifacts, we're just saying take the level down just a little bit, right? So it doesn't have to be a cleave meta, right? You still have a lot of different units. You still have Fallen Cecilia, Sparrier, which is insane. You still have Elena. You still have all these other things that will allow you to be able to play normally. So I think nerfing the Aureus and Adamant Shield are a place to start. And the other thing is who can they add to the game, right? So people are saying Emma Luluka. Emma Luluka will help a lot, but will also contribute to that tank meta because she's so powerful in a tank team that it's just going to be another damage dealer that tank teams can take, right? So it's not necessarily fixing the meta as much as just adding more. The other thing that a lot of people are hopeful for are going to be the sets, and I don't have the answer to that. I just know that Smilegate does have to add a set that helps counter tanks while not giving tanks the ability to do more damage. So one thing that was thrown around was defense penetration. Can you imagine a Fallen Cecilia or an Ambitious Tywin with a defense penetration set? That's just adding to the tank meta. So we have to be extremely careful, and Smilegate has to be extremely careful on how they're going to introduce those sets come November. So again, there's a small stuff that Smilegate has to decide on how they will balance this current night meta. So that is all I have for you guys today. I hope y'all didn't feel like this is kind of a rant. I don't like tank meta. I still really like Epic 7. But I feel like it's getting to a point where I see a lot of players not enjoying themselves, especially content creators, and that just puts a damper on the game, right? So it is becoming a problem. It has been a problem for a long time, and Smilegate does need to do something about it because it is becoming extremely oppressive. ML Craw, again, OP, super OP, and they're not going to nerf him, which is fine, but then they need to take actions to start fixing the problem, or people are gonna start losing interest in the game. And with so many games out there that other people are trying out, it could be really dangerous for Smilegate. So it is pivotal that we talk about the tank meta and things that need to be done about it and get Smilegate to start fixing it so that we can all enjoy the game once again. But that is all I got for you guys today, and I will see y'all next time. Peace.